And I think we'll get started. So hello and welcome to this webinar aimed at providing aspiring publishing assistants with insights into the systems that publishers use to run their businesses. I'm going to be showing you around our system, Consonance, today. I'm just going to sort out my screen. We'll be looking at our system, Consonance, but the insights you'll gain will generally be applicable to most systems that you'll come across in your future roles. And it'll be really nice for you to speak knowledgeably about them in any job interview situations that you find yourself in, and we hope there are many, many, many of them. My name's Emma Barnes, and I'm the CEO of Consonance, as well as running indie publisher Snowbooks, and we're going to be looking at Snowbooks data today within Consonance. I'm joined today on the chat by Sarah O'Connor, one of the full stack developers working hard here to build, as Sarah says, the system she wishes she had when she was an editor. So please do note that this webinar is being recorded and will be made publicly available on the internet later on today. So those who missed out on a place can catch up. And welcome to you if you're watching this recording. We sold out of our 100 places on this call in just one afternoon. So I hope this is going to be a really useful set of insights for you as you embark on your publishing career. So if you do want to tweet along and ask questions, our handle is there on the screen. It's at Consonance_app. And if you do ask questions on Twitter, Sarah will be keeping track of them and will let me know the questions that come up as we go. So it's Consonance_app on Twitter. What we want to look at today really is what publishers want. So I'm interested in you understanding what your future employers are preoccupied with. If you know that, you can empathise with them. Their problems become your problems. And so if you can get inside their heads, then the ideas for how you can help with all of their challenges will kind of start rolling out of you. So I'm going to get you to start thinking like the publisher that you're going to work for in the future. And so what do publishers want? So first up, they want to make good on their brand promises. So what do I mean by brand promise? It's the message, sort of explicit or otherwise, that the publisher makes to the world about what its customers and suppliers can expect when they interact with the company. So if you deliver on your brand promise, you strengthen your brand identity, and a stronger brand means ultimately more money, which is obviously the aim of the exercise. So any publisher is going to say to prospective authors and their agents, we will value you, pick us, we'll treat you right, promote your book well, keep our promises, keep you informed, we'll send you the books that you need when you need them for promotions and so on, and here's a £20,000 advance to show how serious we are. And it's the same thing when they sign up with a new distributor. They'll send the message, we're a reliable professional partner. Yes, we'll send you updates about our data regularly, we'll get the pricing right and things like that, we'll hit our pub dates. But there are chances for publishers to blow these brand promises around every corner. So, if you're late with a contract, now the author thinks you're disorganized. If you put the wrong tax codes on the data file to your distributor, they think, what's going on there? If you sell the French rights twice, now you're in the dock for selling IP that you don't own and you look like an idiot. If you share your author's contact details with a literary festival inappropriately, now you're in breach of GDPR legislation. And if you're late with royalties persistently, then your authors go straight to the booksellers saying you're charlatans. So publishers use systems like Consonance to make sure that as many of these interactions with the authors and the agents and distributors and readers go as well as possible. They use a system as a memory store to make sure they don't forget all of the millions of things they need to remember to remain competent and on top of things. So, if you think about it, optimistically, there are about 30 key to-dos to get a book to market. And if you're publishing 100 books a year, then that's 3,000 things to remember and to assign across a large team and coordinate. And that's absolutely what computers are for, not the human memory. So publishers also use Consonance to avoid making mistakes. Here's a list of audio rights that I've sold, so I know not to sell them to anybody else. And I can keep track of the movement of these deals as they shift and change, and that makes me so much more flexible. And publishers can use the system to gather insights about their publishing. Here we've got a visualization of the patterns that I've got in my publishing schedule. So I can sort of see the ebb and flow of our seasonality. It's just really interesting to be able to get that kind of overview as much as being down in the detail of the weeds. And I can see the woods for the trees and look at my data quality. So if we look at the overall checks, the sorts of checks that publishers are making against their data to ensure that the real details are in place, and that everything that needs to be in place in a timely fashion is in place. I can see here that I've got a failing check, and the check is called product height exceeds page trim height. So I'm going to be able to dive into that, drill down, see which one is failing. Oh yeah, sure enough, the product height of 198 mil doesn't exceed the page trim height. So on a hardback, the boards exceed the paper stock. So it's really important to make sure that those dimensions are accurate and correct. And because this is a database, this is a system where everything is linked, I can go to the right bit of the system, see that the data is inaccurate, update it, hit save, and then I've been able to follow through on making sure that the investigations I make into data quality are easy to rectify and to get out to the world. So data quality means not just more sales and better discoverability, but less embarrassment and more pride in your work. You need to have the tools to be able to do your job. And so managing all of this stuff on Post-it notes or on a spreadsheet doesn't give you that flow and that ability to see a problem, home in on it, correct it, move on. So the next thing on the list that publishers want leads on from that, which is one version of the truth. There is so much proliferating data in publishing, and there's also a bit of a tendency towards individuals using their own spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are fantastic, and it's incredibly easy to build up your own mental model of the data and as it pertains to your particular job role. And so it's very natural inclination to want to store your product lists and your rights deals information and your price changes in a spreadsheet. It's very malleable and usable. But publishers who use a database system as opposed to a set of disconnected spreadsheets have got everything connected. And so let's take a look at that, because at the heart of Consonance and all publishing management systems like this is one product list. And this is the single source of truth that's used by all departments. So we're talking rights, editorial, production, marketing. They all come to one place rather than having individual spreadsheets. And this avoids something called functional silos, where marketing as a function work in isolation from editorial, or production never have cause to talk to publicity. So functional silos are where teams don't have the tools to share information between themselves. And so what that means from the business is they have to replicate data across the business. If you replicate data, then it's going to be suffering from differences, and it's in differences where complications lie. You need to have one source of truth for your publication dates and for the GBP price and the tax rate and so forth. But here, in a database kind of system, we have all teams across the entire company working together using the same source of truth. So if we have a look at the if I can get my thingy out of the way, we're going to be looking at the sort of links that people can go to from one of these product lists, and you can see all of the different sorts of angles that we can now jump to. We're not looking at just the metadata, but the workflow, the to-dos, the contract information about this particular work. We're looking at rights and permissions. So the permissions department doesn't have to maintain a spreadsheet with just the permissions on it, and that would get out of sync with editorial really quickly. And they can have discussions alongside the data to make sure that everyone's on the same page and able to collaborate. So the sort of information here that we're looking at is bibliographic information in the first instance, but we've got the publication date here, the endorsements. We're going to come on to talk about in some detail subject classification schemes as a way of being able to tag up data in meaningful ways so that external third parties can understand it. So we've got all of that rich bibliographic information, but like I say, we've also got data quality insights. We've got a list of to-dos so that we're managing the tasks that need to be done on this sort of on this project. We've got information about the contract, the P&L, and we've got a way to get this data out of the system as well, into selling materials. So here's an advanced information sheet. The single source of truth is producing marketing materials so that you don't have to sit as an editorial assistant and create these in InDesign or Word. You can be satisfied that the number of pages here, the measurements, the ISBNs are the single agreed source of that important data. And it's not just one version of the truth across one system as well. You know, these sort of systems, publishers don't use them in isolation with everything else. They maintain a kind of mosaic landscape of multiple systems, like their website or their distributor systems, or the list of forthcoming publications for sales agencies and the like. So anytime you're using a system like this, it has to play nicely with the other systems. And so in publishing, we have a way of doing that, primarily for metadata, and it's a data standard called ONIX. And ONIX looks a bit like this for this one particular book. And when we look at ONIX, it does look a little bit, you know, potentially codey, techie, XML, but I just want to share this with you so that you can see that the thing about ONIX is it's not so much that it's very complicated, there's just an awful lot of it. So this is the ONIX for one particular product, and that proliferates across an entire publisher's list. But let's just have a look at one of these elements here. You can see that this says title of series. And so, you know, this is an English language tag on a piece of data. And the reason that we have these tags is to disambiguate this information. So all of the recipients of data throughout the book trade that get this ONIX message know that when we say title of series, we are talking about the title of the series. We haven't labeled it series name or name of series or series. We've called it this very specific title of series. And so it's very clear that our system and another system are talking about the same thing. And that's the absolute beauty of ONIX. We have this lingua franca where we can communicate across systems, you know, primarily to sell more books. So I don't know if you've ever heard that old adage about doing speeches and talks. The advice goes, tell them what you're going to say, tell them what you've told them. And ONIX is just the same here, and so is any kind of XML, which is what we're looking at. So it says, tell them what you're going to say. We're going to talk about the title of series. Tell them, and then that's the title of the series. And then the ending tag is tell them what you told them. And you can tell that this is an ending tag because it's got a / there. So, you know, multiply that core concept of tagged up information across all of the sorts of different information that you need to communicate about a particular product, and then multiply that across your entire list as well. And yes, absolutely, you've got a huge load of data there, and it's, you know, it's a job of work to manage it, but it's not complicated. There's just a lot of it. If you want to know more about ONIX, then we've written up guides for beginners to ONIX on our blog. That's on the Consonance.app website, so definitely dive in and have a read about that. What I want you to take away from this is that ONIX is not the big scary thing that people sometimes make it out to be. It is metadata structured in a particular format such that everybody can read it. So we can send publisher data to other systems via ONIX, and we can also send it in a number of other formats, like they call it a JSON API. And again, you can find out more about that from our website. And you can actually use the Consonance API if you did want to, as part of an initiative that we run called Side Project Summer. So in fact, I'll show you the documentation. If you go to our website and look on resources for developers, then you can see the actual data that comes out from Consonance, and this data source is on our demo system. So we've included the authentication token. You can absolutely open up the terminal on your computer, and you'll have to Google to know what I'm talking about. Paste that in, and you'll get back a response from the Consonance demo site. And we've got people who are using this API as part of Side Project Summer to put together, really interesting publisher websites, advanced information sheet generators, all sorts of things. So it's a really interesting resource for you to maybe get ahead of the curve slightly on there, and be able to demonstrate to future employers that you know what an API is, you've seen one, I mean, job done, this is an API response, you're winning. And you've investigated and tried to understand it. And I think, publishing is increasingly technologically interested and competent, but if you can display some tech skills like this, you are definitely going to be an appealing candidate for roles, because publishers know that it's really important to do all of the things that we're talking about today, but not everybody has caught up to the same level yet. So I feel this is an interesting and effective way to mark yourself out as being both interested enough in the industry to want to dive in and look at this stuff, but also that you can roll your sleeves up and do things that will enable the publisher to sell more books. And that's why today we're looking at what good publishers want, and hopefully giving you an insight into the sorts of things that will really appeal when you're talking to them. Here's a real life example of a publisher's website that every night takes that feed, and even though we sort of wrote it and I know exactly how this works, I still get a bit of a tingle and a thrill to see that the data that's on this website here just magically arrives overnight on a feed from an API call. Nobody had to sit and retype data. Nobody had to go to the ZBooks website back end and start retyping ISBNs in from Consonance. And so that brings me on to my next point about what publishers want, which is that publishers crave time to be creative. So there's a sort of uncomfortable truth in publishing, which is that many junior roles remain secretarial. And we've written about this on our blog and in the bookseller quite a lot, so you can dig those articles out. So systems like Consonance really do avoid bright young things such as yourselves doing endless drudge work, like retyping data into websites and spreadsheets and Word docs. We saw earlier the advanced information sheet that gets generated. And it's kind of important to note that a PDF marketing sheet like this, when we clicked on the button, it's generated from that single source of truth in real time. So they're up to date. What you'll find in any publisher who doesn't use a database like this is that there'll be an InDesign document or a Word document saved on the hard drive or saved on the C drive, or the network drive. And if the pub date changes or the price changes, somebody has to go and open the Word doc and change it, open the spreadsheet and change it, go to the website and change it. Having a single source of truth that generates the most current information in a multitude of different formats is absolutely a time saver. And this isn't just about our roles being interesting as publishers. You know, humans are really expensive, one of the greatest expenses of a publishing company. And so it makes huge sense for a publishing for publishing companies to make decisions to get the most out of the human brains that are working for them by being creative and coming up with new ways to sell more books and, you know, have editorial insights rather than maintaining multiple different sources of truth. So this is a really key point to take into job interview situations, to emphasize that you understand the importance of good data management and the time and the cost savings that that can bring, so that ultimately the publisher can sell more books. I mean, I feel it's much better to spend the time trying to figure out how to automate something than it is to mindlessly copy and paste all day. And there's a rather good comic on the internet, which I'll show you now, which is like a matrix of figuring out whether it's worth the time. So this is XKCD. Down the left here, we have how much time you shave off. Along the top, it says how often do you do the task. So, you know, if you do a task weekly and it takes 4 minutes, if you spend some time automating that, then you're going to shave 1 second off. But if you do a task every 10 days, then you're going to be able to shave an hour off. And, you know, this really adds up. So it's worth doing that mental arithmetic to think, I should just take the time to automate this task and not spend it on just mindlessly doing it again and again. So, you know, if you find yourself in your new roles being asked to do sort of mindless, repetitive tasks, and you have that hunch that there must be a better way, then you're absolutely right, there is. And it will be hugely to the benefit of the company you're working for to gently suggest new and better ways of doing that. A great example is importing data. So like we say, a system like this doesn't exist in a vacuum. There are a number of different sources of data and recipients of data, and, you know, being able to import data in an efficient manner means that you can, you know, share that information between systems, even if it's an ad hoc process or if you're onboarding your data to a new system. So always look for the import and export functions of whichever systems you're using so that you can save some time there. Anytime you find yourself like typing an ISBN manually or copying and pasting between a spreadsheet, then that's your clue to sort of give pause and think, is there an automated or a semi-automated way that I can do this? Same with uploading files to places. We are gifted in this industry with a set of standard identifiers. By that I mean numbers such as the ISBN, which no doubt you'll have heard of. And that acts as a useful ID that a book can carry around with itself, so that various systems can identify which ones, which books they actually relate to. So our file uploader, you know, if you select files to upload and you choose an ISBN named picture, then you can upload that, and that sort of works magically for free. So that's a really useful thing to do as well. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the desire by publishers to tackle the source of all evil. And I'm going to pause just for a moment to see if you can imagine what on earth the source of all evil in publishing is. I suspect it might not be what you think it is, but I shall enlighten you in a moment. And so the source of all evil is a late manuscript. So if you think about it, if the manuscript is late from the author or agent, the knock-on effect is awful. All of the workflow that you've set up to try to corral all of the different people in these different functions to get the book out in a timely fashion, all of those dates have a knock-on. So everything should be done in a publishing company to make sure that the manuscript is not late. And here is the secret. I'm going to show you the contract section from the Consonance system, part of the, this is the contract edit page, and amongst all of these other sorts of details, I've got delivery dates here. And by the way, I've made up this, particular contract to avoid sharing any proprietary information. So, you know, and by the way, coming back to that making good on brand promises, you add the information here into the contract edit page. And then the beauty of that is that this system generates the PDF contract that goes out to the author or agent. So here it is. It's like a mail merge function. You know, you've got the template of all of the information here, and then you've got the data sort of slotted in, like you would do when you're doing a mail merge letter. So we've got all of the data that's put in at this stage for the purposes of generating a contract that can be sent out for approval or negotiation or otherwise to the author or agent. But then it's that same data is ready to be used to generate royalty statements in 18 months' time. So you don't have to get the finance department to maintain another version of the truth. And you're providing the same data on the royalty statement as on the contract. So there's that sort of seamlessness that gives your authors the confidence that you're organized. And you've got to remember that authors have often put their heart and soul into writing their book, and they don't interpret a late royalty statement as an administrative hiccup. It is honestly interpreted as a slight, a sort of offence, because emotions run really high around something that took real creativity. And so I don't want you to ever think that workflow and data management is just the admin side of publishing. It's the absolute heart of it. It's how you deliver on your brand promise. So yes, you store the data in this sort of format so that you can generate the contract at the acquisition stage. And then later on, you generate the royalty statements. And I've faked one here. This is not real data. And you'd run a huge number of statements at a time. But the PDF statement that's going to get mailed out to the author or agent has exactly the same information on as the contract. So again, there's that lovely continuity and assurance and a lack of lateness, like we say. So not only have we been able to have that lovely smooth workflow over a long period of time, you know, we're talking 12, 18, 24 months from pre-acquisition to sending out the first royalty statement, but we can also use that contract information as part of our workflow. And I'll show you what I mean. Here we are again, you know, we can jump to various different parts of the system from other parts where we're on the contract, and we're going to jump to the to-dos, the metadata side of things. I've faked this. But what we can do is use the data that we put in the contract to set up to-dos further down the line. And so remember, the aim of the exercise here is to avoid late manuscript deliveries. So what we're going to be doing is using the delivery dates that we've put in the contract to set up to-dos. And so I'm saying here in the contract, the earliest manuscript illustration delivery date is a particular time. So 3 months before that, we've put a to-do in the system for me to check that the illustrations are coming on okay. And now mentally, I don't need to remember to check my, 56 different freelancers who are all doing different things. The data is helping us, and the data is being kept alive here. It's not just a date on a Word document in a filing cabinet now. It's much more meaningful than that. So 3 months out, I say I'm going to check that the illustrations are coming on okay. And then on that actual delivery date, so due no months and no days before, I'm going to get the illustrations. And if I queue up enough of these to-dos, they act a bit like canaries in the mine. I get to, if the biographical note or the blurb or the illustrations are late, then you know, the team can think, gosh, does that mean everything else is going to be late? And we can go into action and we can start discussions and say, you know, is this happening? What's going on here? So really, really helpful to be able to get data to work in ways that you wouldn't normally think it would work. You know, you'd think that a delivery date would stay on a bit of paper and that's it. But no, it can be put to work so that you can achieve these core objectives of not having a late manuscript delivery. You know, really, really fruitful to be able to think about the interesting ways that you can use data that might not necessarily jump out as the first option. So ultimately, all of this, making good on brand promises, having this single source of truth, getting your key workflows optimized, it all leads to the main point of the publishing exercise, which is to sell more books or to get more eyeballs if you're open access focused. And so how do you sell more books? You have to make them discoverable. We've seen a number of different ways to achieve data quality excellence. And now we're going to dive a little deeper into a few of the areas now. We're going to look at some of those industry standard identifiers. We're also going to bear in mind as well that discoverability isn't everything. And there's a blog post on our blog called something like Discoverability Isn't Nearly Enough. So definitely go and read that and get a sense of how publishers can engage in more inbound marketing approaches, the sort of outreach approaches to readers. The data will work hand in hand with that sort of approach. But the overall aim of the exercise is to sell more books, to be more present in front of readers at the right time when they're either searching or browsing for the things that they want or might need. So first of all, I'm going to strangely go to one of our contact records. If we're talking about industry standard identifiers, I would think that your mind would naturally leap to the ISBN. It's the classic, it's the one that we referenced earlier. You know, it's this fantastic resource that not many industries have, to be honest. You know, this tailor-made identifier so that we know exactly what we're talking about when we say 978, 190, blah, blah, blah. But there are plenty of other identifiers as well that tag up other important records within publishing. And so what I'm going to do is show you one of those, and we're going to look at this contact record. Now, I've chosen Virginia Woolf because she has got a degree of presence and she also doesn't have an address, so I don't have to break any confidences by showing you her record. And you'll see here that Virginia Woolf has this ISNI. And there are a variety of other different identifiers that we could apply to Virginia Woolf. There's this identifier called the ORCID ID. So ORCID and ISNI and other identifiers that are relevant more to organizations than individual people are all ways for authors and organizations to maintain their kind of career history, the bulk of their work in a synthesized way, again, across systems. So ISNI isn't something that Consonance invented. ISNI is a standalone organization that assigns disambiguating IDs to people so that when they're referenced in a wide variety of different places, from websites to academic articles, they can be referenced with this tag that is then searchable and other people can find them easily. I'm going to click through to show you the ISNI website because you wouldn't believe how many identifiers there are for some sort of single individual people. And I'm going to choose Shakespeare. And, you know, I mean, have a think now. You might think, well, maybe like 3 different ways of identifying William Shakespeare. You might want, you know, you might spell him with without an E on the end. You might do some funny capitalization, but you know, Shakespeare's Shakespeare, right? Well, if I search for the number of ways that you can refer to Shakespeare, you'll see that it's actually over 400 ways. All of these different ways that different locales around the world publish Shakespeare's works. And there's quite a funny one in here. I think there's a rather interesting one where he's got a completely different name, which there's bound to be a story behind. So this sort of thing really shows that there is, oh, there you go, Francis Bacon Shakespeare, how lovely. So this sort of thing really goes to show, I think, that being able to clearly identify records provides a great sort of value and a service to your authorship, because again, making good on that brand promise, you are honouring their career. You're making sure that the books they publish with you can be nicely associated with books that they've published with other publishers and other activities that they've done. Similarly, it's great to be able to tag up contacts with other meaningful, discoverable data about themselves. You know, if Virginia Woolf is the adjunct professor of something at a particular organisation, then definitely tag it up. The more, it's like, it's the essence of the internet, really, isn't it? That the more points of data and connection there is between different assets on the internet, the better. So yes, I would certainly recommend that you keep your eye open for all these sorts of particular identifiers, and look at some of the organizational ones as well, because there's Ringgold and other sort of, you know, organizational Dun and Bradstreet IDs as well, so that's worth having a good look at. But what we're also going to look at, as well as identifiers, is classification schemes. And I'm going to take you to the metadata page for the London scene here. I've faked a lot of data around this for the purposes of today, but this is an actual book that we published in 2004. And it's a collection of lovely little essays that Woolf wrote about London, little vignettes. And it was a lost book. Good Housekeeping magazine originally published it, I think, in 1932. And then we discovered it and republished it in hardback. And it was, you know, really lovely little addition to her publications. And so it was, you know, there's a lot of rich descriptions that go on within the book that we can pull out and use to tag the subject schemes. Now, within Consonance and within, I'm sure, most systems that you'll see the three standard classification schemes that are used globally. FEMA is the most current, I guess, and the most recently updated, maybe. BSAC is more North American focused and BIC is more European focused. But they all do more or less the same thing, which is to provide a big long list of subject codes that you can apply to your works. And again, the great thing about this is that it's a common language. You're able to say in Consonance that this book is DNL, literary essays, but Amazon know exactly what you're talking about when you say DNL. And so does Waterstones.com, and so does Nielsen, the data aggregator in the industry. And so does Barnes & Noble over the water. So, you know, it's great to have these lists, these commonly agreed lists, so that we can all talk to each other and communicate and make sure that the way we tag data up to be discovered is meaningful across systems. So we've got a multitude of different subjects for the London scene here. The secondary level is society and culture. And then we've got geographical qualifiers. There's a lovely walk described in the City of London, and there's a walk described down in the docks, which was very different in 1932. So that's been noted there. So people who are interested particularly in the City of London when they're searching in Amazon or on the internet for books that they would be interested in, this is going to be tagged up appropriately. We've got time qualifiers here, and we've even got style qualifiers. You know, there's a discrete style code for the Bloomsbury group, 6BK. And if I click on that to show you some of the others, there's all sorts of things like Art Deco and Assemblage and Cubism, Camden Town Group. It's wonderful. So all of these tags are there ready to be applied to works, and that increases their discoverability, makes them more findable, more searchable, more indexable. We can have a look at the effects of some of that discoverability here. We can look at the discoverability tab, and we're taking a feed here from the Google Books API, which is another great API to have a look at. And we can see that, yeah, they've got the right image there, so that's fantastic. And then, you know, we can link to some of these websites that the data is flowing through to. So, you know, let's look on Amazon Japan to see. Yep, there it is. I mean, I expect it is. The Japanese isn't very good. But, you know, that it's so exciting and tangibly interesting as a publisher to know that data that you store in one place can flow out to a number of different other places. So that can be really exciting. So going back to our sort of list of products as well, we're going to be able to see, in fact, I'll have a look at this range of products. We're going to be able to see a number of different ways to sort of interact and promote the, getting the wrong page, and promote the presence of all of this data. And so, you know, as we say, whilst it's stored here, the intention is for it to flow out and make sure that it can work its hardest on the internet. And the time that you save in being able to manage all of this stuff, hopefully, you know, is intended to really free people up to engage their brain more fully. The time that you save from all of this data entry can be put into imaginative thinking about selling more books. And, you know, you'll have your own motivations and reasons for wanting to go into publishing. But I hope that one of the reasons is that you want your books to be spread as wide as possible, and you want to have the time and the space to be able to free up your mind, for it to be liberated to do sort of interesting creative work and have good interesting ideas and think across departments rather than, you know, just working on spreadsheets. So when you land your roles, search out the system that the company is using, understand what the single source of truth is there. Make sure, you know, from your sort of junior position, it would be great if you could make recommendations up to management to say, you know, it would be great if we could, you know, shave this bit of manual labor off of the work process by using some custom reports to generate this spreadsheet instead of us having to, you know, manually do it. So systems like this are intended to work hard for you so that your human brain can be freed up to do the useful imaginative work that I know your brain will be so good at. So I will leave you now with some of these links. I'm really hoping, because I haven't been able to see, I'm really hoping that there have been some questions that have come up. So I'm going to ask Sarah to maybe unmute herself now and share with me, hi, if there are any questions that anyone's had over Twitter whilst we've been talking.
Yes, so first my apologies that there's no chat in Zoom. There was supposed to be chat in the Zoom, but somebody, i.e. me, didn't do it properly. So we're taking questions via Twitter and there's still time. So I do have two questions from Twitter currently. Emma on Twitter had a great question, and she wanted to know, how can you show the data skills that you learn in your publishing application?
That's so to clarify, you've presumably, have you spent a lot of time learning all of these aspects of publishing, and you want to be able to really make the most of them within your day-to-day job? Is that?
No, I think it's if you are applying for a job, and you've done this course, this webinar, and then you've done a thing with ONIX, and then so how do you display that in a way, or use maybe the right words, or what's the right way to sort of present yourself, like I am knowledgeable in these things?
Absolutely. Well, one thing I would do is go to the BIC website to see if the publisher that you're applying to is on the BIC Excellence Standards list. So BIC is an organisation who are responsible for maintaining some of these classification lists that we were looking at. And so they're, highly motivated to make sure that everybody, all publishers' data is as good as it can be. They provide a certification scheme, which is wonderful, and it's the data checks that we were looking at earlier. It's that long list of probably only about 47 odd checks, but it's things like, is the imprint present? Are the thema style qualifications present? Is there a product width? You can look on the BIC website. If the publisher isn't on that list, then you could find the words to subtly say, what I would really like to do in my first 3 months of working for you is to understand where we are with our data against the BIC excellence standards. I know that there are 52 checks, and I'd love to understand, where you are in achieving those, because, I really am passionate about making sure that our books are going to be findable and discoverable and are represented as well as they can be, because of course we're making promises to the authors that we're going to promote and market their books as well as possible. And so, this is a great way for us to show our authors that that we're taking that seriously, and that our data is excellent. So I think, and if they're on that list, then fantastic. You can talk about how important that is and how you'd love to work and maintain those excellent standards. And if they're not on that list, then you can help them to become more excellent. So I think that would be a really kind of in-depth and focused and interesting angle to take in an interview situation.
And also, just butting in and adding, the list that Emma put of what a good publisher wants, if you're hitting a point in your cover letter or in some supplemental materials that shows that you understand what a good publisher wants, then you're sort of then you're coming at it from an angle that they can see that you understand some broad strokes of the industry, and step in to your role with that foresight.
Absolutely.
Also, if you make something, like if you have a play with our the Consonance API or any kind of thing, I always like to tell people who are aspiring to get into publishing, do the job you want already on whatever scale that you can do it. So if you want to do editorial things, make a zine or an anthology, or if you want to do marketing things, pick your favorite book and build a site for it. Or if you want to do production things, get a book printed, do the job that you want so that you have an asset to put on the table and say, I can do this already, hire me.
That is a fantastic point. And probably worth us mentioning, Sarah, the Side Project Summer initiative that we run every summer. If you go to, there's a website with quite a few ideas. I'll just pull up the website. It's sideprojectsummer.com, and there's the sort of benefits that we've been talking about, but there's this ideas list, and any of the things on this list I think would hugely enhance a publishing CV. And as Sarah said, there's ways to write your own static website with data pulled from somewhere, or purely written from the point of view of a single book microsite. Publishers, I'm quite sure, don't you think, Sarah, would be delighted to see a tangible example, particularly if it was one of the publisher's actual books. If you've taken the the time to write a single page HTML website, I think that's a very tangible and immediate way of demonstrating how useful you'd be.
Absolutely, and handily, that answers a question that we have had
Oh.
on Twitter from RM, which is saying, is there a way to practice this type of software at home, even in a limited way? And Side Project Summer is exactly that. So not only do you have the ideas there, but it's a hashtag on Twitter, and we get together every Friday at noon, and people, it's basically a way to be accountable for the goals that you set yourself. So you come on a Friday afternoon or at any point in the week and say, now I'm going to do X, and then you come back later on and you go, I did X, or you know what, I didn't do X, but I learned this and I fell over on this. And it's also another way you can get some support, so people can help you when you get stuck. So ways to practice software at home, definitely check out Side Project Summer.
Absolutely. And it's, you know, in these strange times, and well done everybody for, you know, getting through them. And, you know, being on a call like this really demonstrates such an impressive level of fortitude. You know, you're thinking about your career, you know, at a very difficult time. So, you know, you've sort of self-selected as being very impressive people. And, you know, being able to join in with the community, you know, to have people like Jamie at the University of London Press, for instance, or our own Andy, and John Pettigrew, who's you know, had been an editor for years in the trade and is now turning into a programmer as well. You know, to be on side with all of these people and to search out a supportive community is a really nice way to, you know, to feel like, you know, you're going in the right direction.
Excellent. So there is, it's a contract-specific question from Angie on Twitter. She's got a question regarding contracts, and she's talking about, I'm trying to couch it in a way that's general, but I think maybe there's a way in to talk about contract clauses in general, but it's about how do contracts get put together in a single source of truth, and then the sort of ramifications of those clauses as the publishing of that product moves forward. For example, if there's a clause like unforeseen circumstances, like force majeure events that delay the publication of a book, when something like that happens, how does that affect the rest of the data, and how do you keep a record of it in a sort of legal way?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a great example that really speaks to what we've been talking about, which is that data changes all the time, whether it's you know, a contract that needs renegotiating, or whether a price changes. You know, we're I'm sure going to see paper price changes coming through as a result of the pandemic, which will mean that lead times will change for books printed overseas. Costs will change. So that, you know, there's always a lot of juggling that needs to be done, and that's why it's so important to have the latest version of data in one place, so that there's only one place to update it. So here we are on a particular contract, and sure enough, you know, there's a whole section on errata, because in less extreme times mistakes happen anyway, and you might want to be able to loop back and say, oh gosh, we misspoke in this clause, or we've renegotiated something. You'd also want to make sure you put in renegotiation dates. So, you know, if you think that this happened actually with ebook royalty rates. Back when ebooks started being popular, publishers wanted to pay, you know, normal sort of royalty rates, anything from 7.5% to 15, 18, 20% of net receipts. And author representatives were like, no, 50%. There's much less effort that needs to go into an ebook. And then ebook creators were like, really? So there was a whole thing about how much should an author get for the ebook format of their book. And so it became very standard to put a review date in the contract to say, we're going to revisit this clause in 3, 6, 9, 12 months, and reserve the right to change it as circumstances change. So yes, super question, because data will change, and that's why it's so important to have a kind of control over it.
What am I? Yes, so that, thank you, great. That is all the questions that we have. I had one.
Yes.
Which is, would you touch a little bit on, for anyone interested in the rights department, what type of parts of the workflow would a single source of truth system support in that department?
Great question. Rights is absolutely a discipline unto itself, and the rights people work very hard within any organization to shore up revenue and provide an extra baseline of revenue that means that the whole of the rest of the company can continue. So oftentimes they find themselves thinking in completely different timescales to the rest of the organization, and as editorial are bringing forward and changing pub dates, rights have to keep alongside with them. So again, a rights person can spend an awful lot of time just maintaining the same data that is being maintained by the editorial department. So, with things such as, if we have a look at the rights and permissions area here, it's really important to be able to sort of think about these deals by stage, and then to be able to see, okay, what is the most recent source of data for this particular product? Have we sold French rights yet, and therefore is it worth having this conversation with this other French publisher? So yes, rights is a specific discipline that shares data with the rest of the organization, and so you need to find that sweet spot between letting them achieve their aims and objectives and manage their own workflow, whilst knitting in with the rest of the organization. It's that cross-functional sort of anti-functional silos approach, which liberates them again to get their job done.
Excellent. Thank you for that. That is all the questions, and I think we're okay to wrap it up.
Absolutely. So we'll be putting up a blog post later on today with the further reading. We've mentioned a few of these classification schemes, some links, and we've talked about Subproject Summer as well, and we'd love to see you over there as well. So, do stay in touch on Twitter, and join in on Side Project Summer, and, just don't be a stranger. Keep in touch, and all of the luck in the world to you with your job hunt. We'll be really excited to see how it goes. So thank you so much for your time today, everyone. And thank you, Sarah, for doing such a wonderful job of keeping the internet on.
All right, off we go. We're saying goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.